This is Jay Rogers. I'm the director of the Forerunner, and I'm going to be covering Daniel chapter 3 through 6, which are the historical sections of Daniel, as opposed to the prophetic sections, which are chapters 2 and then 7 through 12. The historical sections are written in the Chaldean language, which is Chaldean Aramaic, and they cover the period of Daniel's life. In Daniel chapter 1, it's actually from the time he's a teenager. And then it picks up again in chapter 3 with the historical narrative going all the way through the end of Daniel's life, which is about 535 BC, around there. We're not exactly sure the day that Daniel died, but we can date it to sometime when he was in his mid to late 80s. So what I want to do at this point is I just want to show you, this is the timeline that I did. This is in my book, and this is called Prophets of the Exile Timeline. And to understand Daniel, you have to understand the exile period. And I'll do another video later on where we talk about the restoration period after Daniel. But to understand the chronology of the exile period prophets, we have to see there's an overlap between the time when Daniel was elevated to the position of prime minister of Babylon, which is around 603 BC, and then some of the events in 2 Kings, 2 Chronicles, which describe the final days of Judah prior to the fall of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple in 586 BC. So that's quite a big gap right there. 603 to 586, let's see, that's about 17 years, if I'm correct with my math here. 17 years, give or take a year. As well as the last prophecies of Jeremiah and Ezekiel, which were given in 586 and 573, respectively. So Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel were they were contemporaries. Jeremiah was the oldest. Ezekiel may have been around the same age as Daniel. Further, Daniel 5 and 6 occur in history after the sequence of Daniel 7 and 8. So the correct sequence would be Daniel 3, Daniel 4, then 7 and 8, then 5 and 6. Those contain the second and third visions of Daniel, of course, and they take place in the historical context, but because of the fact that they're written in Hebrew, they're moved to the Hebrew section of the book. All right, so 640 BC were the last good days of Judah. Yeah, the two tribes have been separated from the time of Solomon, which was about in the 900s, and Judea was the southern kingdom. The earlier kingdom was destroyed. The northern kingdom, Israel, was destroyed earlier by the Assyrians. So we're up to 640 BC. And I'm actually going to cover Isaiah because there's an interesting section in Isaiah. I'll do a whole video on that, about the fall of Babylon, which is prophesied in Isaiah chapter 14 and onward. But that's not, I'll cover that when we do the fall of Babylon. Okay, so 2 Kings 22 and 2 Chronicles 34 cover Josiah's good reign. Then there's another prophet named Zephaniah, which is right in that period, Zephaniah 1 through 3. Jeremiah begins to prophesy in 627 BC, and that's the section in which he says, I'm only a youth. So a youth would be a teenager or a young man, someone before the age of 30, because usually prophets were in the priesthood and they didn't get their call until they could enter the priesthood, which was at the age of 30. So Jeremiah is a young man at this point. There's more prophecies of Jeremiah, which continue on through Jeremiah chapter 10, all in 627 BC. Judah forsakes God, Jeremiah's message at the temple gate. Then there's another prophet named Habakkuk. I used to call him Habakkuk, but apparently it's Habakkuk. It's Habakkuk 1 through 3. Then we have 5 years later, after 627, there's another oracle from Jeremiah, which is Jeremiah 11 and 12. And that was given to Josiah. So Josiah heeds the word of the Lord. He prepares for the temple's repair. They find the lost book of the law in 621. Joshua celebrates the Passover. So those were good years for Judah. The good years of Josiah. Jeremiah prophets were being listened to. And then we have Jehoiakim. Jehoiakim, I keep saying that wrong. There's Jehoiakim and Jehoiakim. I actually found an error. I won't tell you where it is, but I misplaced this letter, the N, in one of my writings. So 2 Chronicles 36, Jehoiakim's wicked reign. And then Jeremiah proclaims the covenant is broken. So now it's, right, he proclaims the covenant is broken. I've heard Reconstructionist authors say that the prophet's job is to serve a lawsuit to Israel. Like God is suing Israel. You've broken the law. Here's my lawsuit. Here's going to be the consequences if you don't repent. So Jeremiah proclaims the covenant again, but this time it's broken. He prophesies against Egypt. He prophesies against Philistia, the Philistines. This is Jeremiah 46 through 47. Notice also that Jeremiah's prophecies are out of sequence historically too, or they believe it is. And then we have the year after, or the year of, or the year after that Jeremiah is probably brought into Babylon. Babylon is Babylon defeats Judah, and they take the princes of Judah into Babylon. That's Daniel chapter 1. And that probably took place the year before, 605 BC. The chapter 1 takes place 604. And then the video that I just did on Daniel interpreting Nebuchadnezzar's dream is Daniel 2. Then Jehoiakim, who's still in Judah, rebels. He's basically placed in as a vassal king. They make a treaty with Babylon. He's allowed to reign there still, but he rebels. Then there's another war in 597, and this is the second captivity. This is when Jehoiakim is killed. Jehoiakim is exiled, and Zedekiah, which is his brother, I believe, rules in his place. I should really look these up before. But he's another member of the royal family, a relative of Jehoiakim, and he rules in his place. This is 2 Kings 24. And then 594 BC, Jeremiah prophesies against Moab. Jeremiah prophesies against Ammon. This is 48 and 49. Then we have Ezekiel appears. Ezekiel appears in Babylon. He's actually in the area of Babylon that's later near the capital of Persia, when Persia takes over. 593 BC, there's a prophecy at Shabar, his instruction and calling. Ezekiel eats the scroll. Ezekiel foretells the siege of Jerusalem. Now, there's a siege that already happened. There was actually 2 captivities that already happened, but now this is the final siege where the temple is going to be destroyed. That doesn't happen until 586. All right. So he has a vision of the end. Ezekiel's first temple vision. Ezekiel sees God refuse the elders. That's Ezekiel 20. So you have a little jump here from this all goes in order pretty much in Ezekiel. Ezekiel is in order and Jeremiah is not in order chronologically. Ezekiel prophesies against Jerusalem. Ezekiel prophesies against the 2 sisters. And then the siege of Jerusalem begins. It lasts approximately 18 months. This is 2 Kings 25. I forget the exact number of months. It's over a year. It lasts. Then we have a previous section of Jeremiah, which is a historical section. And that's Jeremiah 21 through 33. You can see how there are later sections of Jeremiah that are prophetic that are placed later in the book. I don't know why exactly. I haven't done my expositions on the other major prophets, which I hope to do at some point, but you have to look at the historical background and then the prophecies, and they're 2 different things. They're not always in chronological order in the books. So the siege of Jerusalem begins. Jeremiah has conflicts. Jeremiah prophesies judgment on Judah. It's a very long section in Jeremiah. It's what most people think of when they think of Jeremiah. Then the siege of Jerusalem actually begins in 588. I have that twice. Oh, that's in 2 Kings, there's an account in 25, and then there's also an account of it in Ezekiel 24. So it all happens, that's all the same year. But the long chronological explanation is in 2 Kings 25, and then Ezekiel 24 is another historical section. 587 BC is God's vengeance on Ammon and Edom, kind of inserted in there. The fall of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple happens next. That's also in 2 Kings 25. and recorded in Jeremiah 52. So you notice that you have this jump from 45 to 52 in the space of 2 years. And there's prophecies there's other chapters in Jeremiah that are prophecies that are out of sequence. There are Psalms of Desolation, 2 Kings 25 and Jeremiah 52. And that's also recorded in Psalm 74 and 79. Jeremiah prophesies against Babylon, Jeremiah 50 to 51. Jeremiah's Lamentations, which is Lamentations 1 through 5. Ezekiel pronounces judgment on Tyre, Ezekiel 26 through 28. Ezekiel prophesies against Egypt, Ezekiel the watchman, Ezekiel explains Jerusalem's fall. Ezekiel foresees reproof and restoration. He sees the resurrection of the dry bones. And then that's all 586 and 585. The battle of Gog and Magog and the judgment on Gog. I have my own interpretation of this, which I will cover as part of this series, probably after this series, because I have written on that. Okay, Daniel 3. That's the section with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. There's Nebuchadnezzar's dream of the tree and Daniel's interpretation of the dream, which is Daniel 4. Then we have the second temple vision, which is kind of sandwiched in between Daniel 4 and Daniel 7. So about 15 years after Ezekiel has a vision of the temple, Daniel sees the 4 beasts. Now, this is now 555 BC, and this is getting into the time of the end of the Babylonian Empire. It's coming to an end, and they still have a good 15 years left. But Daniel has a vision of the 4 beasts. He has a vision of the ram of a goat, which is a more specific vision than the 4 beasts. The 4 beasts centers on Rome. Ram and the goat center on Greece and Persia. Persia and Greece. Then Daniel interprets the handwriting on the wall, Daniel 5. That one is very interesting, and I'll probably spend at least 1 or 2 videos on that, or 2 or 3 videos on that. Daniel survives the lion's den, which is probably like the most famous part of Daniel everyone knows, and I don't really cover it that much because of that. It's not really, it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Daniel 9, which again is getting back into the prophetic portions. There's a prayer, a long intercessory prayer in Daniel chapter 10, and Daniel is comforted by the angel. Daniel 11 is the overthrow of Persia and what happens after that, which is the Greek Empire. So now we're into the Persian period. All right, so he's prophesying during the Persian period in Daniel 11. And then Daniel prophesies the abomination of desolation and deliverance for God's remnant people. Jeremiah and Ezekiel relate to Daniel. I am going to cover a little bit of Jeremiah when we get into Daniel 9, but Ezekiel will be for like another series when I cover Isaiah after that. Really, my favorite book in the Old Testament is Jeremiah, and I haven't studied it as much as I've studied Daniel. Daniel's become my favorite prophet recently, but Jeremiah, since the time I was the first Christian, like I loved getting into Jeremiah, like and all that melancholy stuff. So hopefully at some point I'll be able to do an exposition on Jeremiah, Ezekiel. It's a lot. I'm not a trained theologian, so when I say that, this is really for my own edification. I do these kind of studies, and then I present it to people, and people appreciate it. It's like one of those things. I didn't think anybody was going to read my book on Daniel. I thought I'd sell a few copies here and there, but it's actually done better than I thought it was going to. I think that it could do better in the future, and that's why I'm doing these videos. So if you like this video and you're interested, this is the information down the bottom here. All right. In the Days of These Kings, the Book of Daniel in Preterist Perspective, order at lulu.com on Spotlight because you get a better price, and I also get a better royalty out of that site too. You can also order the book through my website if you want to get a signed copy. It's about the same as Lulu. The turnaround is actually be a little bit faster on my site before my books run out. So this is this. And I actually have a company that's going to be doing a Portuguese translation of my shorter book. I don't know when. They say this year, but maybe it'll be this year or next year or something like that. All right, that's all for this video. This is just a little precursor to my historical section. So if you're interested, stay tuned for the next video. And be sure to like and subscribe, send it to your friends or whatever.